I had an unusual childhood. You see, I grew up with a single father who is also an activist since I was very young. My dad dedicated his life to fighting what he saw as being rampant corruption within every corner of society. In his eyes, his activism was a life and death struggle for freedom. But the world my dad lived in was maybe a little different than the world that you live in. He had a number of beliefs that you may find to be, well, crazy, or ridiculous, or conspiracy theories. These were things like that vaccines contained toxic ingredients that caused, among other things, autism, that GMOs were dangerous chemicals injected into our foods in order to sterilize and poison us, that 9/11 was an inside job perpetrated by our own government to justify a profitable war in the Middle East, that alien species like the reptilians or the Pleiadians had been visiting Earth for millennia and had even infiltrated our governments to enact sinister plans. And that all of these things were hid from us by a secretive cabal, or the deep state, in order to benefit a global elite. Just like how you developed your beliefs from your parents, so too did I. My dad was very aware that his beliefs were uncommon, but he wanted to make sure that I wasn't influenced by the outside world, that I knew this hidden truth. You see, my dad's job was to help people legally avoid vaccines with religious exemptions. To 5-year-old Etienne, he was a soldier fighting in a war against this so-called deep state. He was my father, a confident, intelligent, and zealous advocate who protected me from the dangerous vaccines and GMOs. I would regularly be drilled as a kid on what to do if, for example, they were trying to give out vaccines at school, or if I had some sort of a medical emergency and they tried to give me a tetanus shot. Just say you have a religious exemption, I was told. I was taught to look out for non-GMO foods, to know that they were, in fact, safe to eat. As a kid, I was always scared that at any moment, there's going to be some sort of a deep state takeover that would send us to live in the world of Winston Smith in 1984. It, or the event, could have happened at any moment, or so I thought. Of course, it never actually did happen. I used to agree with my dad. I was also a conspiracy theorist. I've since evolved my views, though, through a long process of listening and learning. By separating myself from my beliefs and then subjecting them to consistent criticism, I changed everything I believed about the world. People often ask me, when did you realize it was wrong? And as much as I would love to tell you that there was one moment, one key detail that made everything fall into place, that's just not how it works. Changing my beliefs so dramatically was a gradual process that took place concurrently over the entire second half of my childhood. Conspiracy theorists are often made fun of for going on the internet to do their research, and probably for good reason. But that's also how I started my journey in the opposite direction. You see, when I was young, I got really interested in learning math and science online. I would watch fun science YouTube channels every week, and that's how I found this YouTube video, Debunking Anti-Vaxxers by ASAP Science. I thought that this was interesting, you know? I mean, at this point, I certainly knew that most people thought vaccines were fine, but I hadn't really realized that you could have done research and been smart and come to any other conclusions than what my dad had. This wasn't a moment where I suddenly realized, oh, vaccines are good, actually. But rather, this was a moment where I realized, oh, there are actually people that believe vaccines are good. And so I had taken my first baby steps towards opening up my mind. After being homeschooled for a few years, I went to a public high school And there, I began getting exposed to other perspectives. The biggest factor that helped me change my beliefs was really just being around everyday people with everyday opinions about the world. A sort of process of osmosis occurred, where the beliefs of those around me seeped into me, causing a gradual shift in perspective. My dad was resistant to my public education, though. He didn't think that what I was learning could be trusted. I think we're all pretty used to disagreeing with our parents, right? I mean, that's probably the most defining aspect of being a teenager. But you've got to understand that as I began to change my worldview, I wasn't just disagreeing with my dad. I was beginning to realize that everything I had thought about the world was wrong. The way I understood things like how institutions worked, or how the government or corporations operated, was wrong. Being around everyday people helped me come to terms with this world-shattering fact that everything I had thought was true about the world was just incorrect. What really cemented the shift in perspective, though, was when I went out of my way to challenge my beliefs by talking to people I disagreed with. What I immediately learned through doing this was that I was bad at justifying myself on pretty much everything. I mean, consistently and repeatedly, people convinced me I was wrong about things I thought that I knew for sure. Eventually, I realized I had to resolve this cognitive dissonance between what I had thought I knew about the world and what I was learning. I believed that vaccines caused autism, that GMOs were dangerous chemicals, that 9/11 was an inside job, that the world was run by a secret cabal. By engaging with my education, by talking to my peers in and out of school, and by seeking out opposing viewpoints, I changed everything I believed about the world over the course of years. But why do people believe wrong things? I mean, my dad is certainly far from the first person to have some strange, nonconformist beliefs. We should be curious about this question because, like it or not, we are all wrong about something. When confronted with someone that we find has a belief that's just out there, our first instinct might be to say, well, they're just stupid, right? I mean, that's a pretty easy thought pattern to fall into. But this isn't a fair evaluation, though. I mean, for one thing, I think my dad is maybe wrong about a lot, but he's definitely not stupid. Maybe you think it's about education. I mean, clearly, flat earthers, for example, just have no idea what they're talking about. They're totally uneducated. But this isn't true either. I mean, there are anti-vax doctors. I've met some of them. Clearly, a mere understanding of vaccines doesn't mean we aren't prone to conspiratorial thinking. And I doubt that many of us actually read the literature before we went out and got our COVID shots. The thing is, talking to experts and doing your own research and what have you is not reliably on its own going to change anyone's mind. Why is that? Is it because people just can't be trusted to form their own beliefs? Should we all just conform to the majority viewpoint held by the largest group of informed and educated experts? Absolutely not. I mean, I think people are not only right to be questioning science and authority, but they should be encouraged to do so. I mean, published research can be wrong. Statistics can often be misunderstood or misused. But how do we determine the right things to question? I mean, are vaccines actually dangerous? Are GMOs bad for you? Is the Earth actually flat? I mean, I could tell you my answers to these questions, but I could be wrong. I mean, I'm imperfect, and you shouldn't just listen to me because I've got some big letters behind me. The thing is, we as a species and a society all collectively build a reservoir of knowledge and understanding about the world. And that's how you need to think about forming our beliefs. Your knowledge creation needs to be collaborative. According to a recent Axios poll, over 20% of Americans say they simply aren't going to get vaccinated. And they're not likely to change their minds either. Why is that? Because more and more, it is easy for us to isolate, to not be collaborative. I'm sure that being at the tail end of a pandemic has us all thinking about isolation a lot. But there are a lot of ways that we can be isolated. We can be isolated by our friends, by our family, by where we live in the world, by our education, and definitely by the things that our parents believed when we were kids. We have to actively do the opposite, to be collaborative, to form our beliefs by talking to people we disagree with. Just like how I was isolated from other perspectives when I was a kid, so too was my dad, who didn't get the chance to challenge his beliefs the way that he could have. His flaw was not being uneducated or unintelligent. It was not getting the chance to be collaborative. It was isolating himself, intentionally and unintentionally, from anyone he disagreed with. No matter how smart or educated we think we are all wrong about something. But most of us don't even think that we need to change our beliefs. So what are we supposed to do? I mean, no matter who you are, there are a lot of people that you think are wrong about something really important. In order to tackle this problem and be collaborative, we need to reckon with two important facts. First, there is no such thing as a crazy belief. No matter what topic or issue you have an opinion about, there is someone out there that is able to argue convincingly and intelligently for the other side. If you don't believe that's true, you haven't been listening enough. You've been isolated, not giving due attention to the people you disagree with. I've heard things that were seemingly so outlandish, you would think nobody could possibly believe them. But I've heard them argued for convincingly from the right perspective. And of course, no belief is crazy to the person that believes it. There is no such thing as a crazy belief. Second, we are all victims of our own beliefs. Changing and forming your beliefs chiefly is not about intelligence or logic. What you can and can't believe is so greatly determined by your environment that we cannot possibly identify ourselves and others with what we believe. What you believe about the world is not the same thing as who you are. We don't get to choose the circumstances that lead to the forming of our worldview. We can't think of people that we might label now as being conspiracy theorists as conspiracy theorists, but rather just people with opinions that we might disagree with, but who are just as much victims of their beliefs as we are of our own beliefs. We are all victims of our own beliefs. We cannot afford to only have conversations with people we agree with and dismiss everyone else. Because if the people I disagreed with kept dismissing me, I would have never learned why I agreed with them. Now, I'm not saying you have to go out and argue with everyone, but neither can the development of your beliefs be mutually exclusive to disagreement. Developing your beliefs requires having honest, collaborative conversations with people from diverse environments. And acknowledging your weaknesses as a human, your imperfections, your inability to be right about everything, doesn't make them disappear. No matter what you say or do or believe, you are always going to be wrong about something, and you need to get comfortable with that fact. You can do this by challenging yourself to engage in conversations collaboratively, by talking to people you disagree with. We cannot have perfect control over the things that we believe, but we can challenge ourselves to have conversations where we listen earnestly in an attempt to understand rather than convince, in an effort to be truer to ourselves. Dad, if there's one thing I could say to you, it would be that I think you're wrong about a lot, but I don't think you're crazy or stupid. And I know you've done your research. And I know you feel the same way about me. I just hope that you can give others the same due diligence. Listen to the people you disagree with and try to understand what they have to say. Have a great night.